CBSN Pittsburgh special presentation.
Mr. Vice President, you know this has not been a good day as far as the pandemic is concerned. Alarming numbers coming out of our three largest states, Florida, California, especially Texas. I know you've been critical of the president's handling of the pandemic in the past, but let's look ahead. If you became president tomorrow, what would you do differently regarding the pandemic and getting these surging cases now under control?
Well, number one, to state I would, and I'm not. This is not second guessing, but I said at the time I would have done a lot of things differently than he did to get us to this place. Number one, a president's job is to lead, not to run away from responsibility. This president says, "Not my responsibility. I'm not responsible. I'm not the one," etc. And the president is supposed to lead. Number one. As they pointed out in the beginning, what happened was that we're up to over 125,000 dead now. We're in a position where it was said when it was 100,000 dead from COVID, Columbia University said if he acted just 1 week earlier, 35,000 more people would be alive.
Forgive me, my time is so short here. I'm not asking you to go back in hindsight. I'm saying if you became president tomorrow with the situation as it is today, what would you do differently?
I would go back to making sure that everybody had masks, that you had PPE lined up. We have been making sure we stockpile all the things that we need that we don't have now.
Some kind of a federal mandate on masks?
You can't make a federal mandate, but I would insist that, in fact, there would be masks. I'd lay out a plan, a detailed plan, which I have laid out in detail, as to how to reopen and what required to reopen. You have to have testing, tracing. You have to be in a position where you're able to see to it. The one thing we do know, these masks make a gigantic difference. I would insist that everybody on public be wearing that mask. Anyone to reopen would have to make sure that they walked into a business that had masks.
Couldn't you use your federal leverage to mandate that, though?
Yes.
And would you?
Yes, I would. From an executive standpoint, yes, I would.
So you would, in effect, mandate the wearing of masks?
I would do everything on my possible to make it required that people had to wear masks in public.
Could you also use your federal leverage to order governors to shut down again in places like Texas, in Houston particularly, Dallas, where the numbers are very alarming?
That raises a serious constitutional question whether you could order a governor to do that. I would make it very clear, and the governors have seen the Lord a little bit here. They're figuring out that they've moved too early, they've moved too quickly, and they need to make sure. I would insist that they move on limiting crowds. I laid out what they call a good shopper. You know, one of the reasons people aren't showing up even now into businesses is they don't feel safe. And because there is no social distancing. There is not a requirement to have masks. So I would go back and do all the things. But one of the things we haven't been doing, I would be stockpiling because we knew this was going to come back. I have a meeting 4 times a week with the leading docs in the country who were talking about the need to stockpile PPE, the protective equipment for docks, for hospitals, et cetera, because it was predicted there would be a second round of this. There would be a surge. It's going to happen. I'd be preparing for what was coming.
On another subject, Mr. Vice President, is your convention going to be virtual? Will you be accepting your nomination to an empty room and on YouTube or something?
You can't say for sure, but it's probable that will be the case.
Can you imagine yourself taking the oath of office wearing a mask?
No, because I could take the mask off in this distance.
It gets crowded on those Capitol steps, though.
Yeah, but you don't have to have it crowded. Look, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know what it's going to be like on January the 20th in 2021.
Yeah.
And that's going to depend on whether this president gets some sense in his head and starts to act responsibly between now and then, how bad it's going to be.
We do have kind of an idea of what the next few months are going to be like, though. Can you imagine yourself having large indoor rallies as the president has begun doing?
No,
You're not going to do any rallies?
No, you asked me 2 things. Number one, can I imagine being in a situation where we're able to do that? If the virus were under control and moved, or we had, like he talked about, a vaccine, or we had ways in which to make sure that this was not being transmitted, then yes. But I don't see that happening.
Okay. Last question. America is so divided. People feel hopelessly divided at times over things like whether you really need to wear a mask, whether you can believe the mainstream media, and so on. Give me an issue around which you could unify Americans?
Just tell the truth. Take responsibility. The bad news is everybody knows me. The good news is they know me. I'll tell them exactly what I believe and what I think. I'll tell them exactly what we have to do. Right now, the vast majority of the American people, over 60, 70%, think people should be wearing masks. It's not so badly divided. It's lacking presidential leadership. The overwhelming majority of the American people know we have to take these precautions. They know that. We have a president who's acting totally irresponsible because all he wants to do is see the stock market rise. That's it. That's his measure of whether he's going to get elected or not elected. It doesn't have much to do with public health. And that's what he's doing.
Do you feel like there is still confusion over your stance on fracking? Because there's been an ad running which suggests that you want it to end as soon as possible. The ad has been called misleading. I grant you. Fact checkers have said it's misleading. But the Trump campaign has said that part of the blame is yours because your statements have been a little confusing. So to be very clear.
Look, they lie.
What's your stance on fracking?
I am not going to stop fracking. Any fracking that's going on now will be monitored. No new fracking on public lands. That's what I've said.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Obviously, you guys saw what former Vice President Joe Biden said about if he was president, he would want everyone to wear masks in public. What is